Charlie Kirk is one of the most polarizing figures in modern American politics. To many, his words are a clear-cut case of racism, designed to provoke and divide. But to his millions of followers, he's a truth-teller who isn't afraid to say what others are thinking. Today, we're not going to debate whether he is right or wrong. Instead, our goal is to understand the specific arguments he makes to defend his views. We'll be looking at his rhetoric, not to endorse it, but to break down its core components so you can decide for yourself.
Begs the question, when you see a black pilot, you wonder, you say, I hope they are qualified. If I'm dealing with somebody in customer service who's a moronic black woman, I wonder, is she there because of her excellence? And Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks. They're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. Why does Kirk believe passing the Civil Rights Act was a mistake? Now, again, apparently they don't listen to the show because we do that at least once a week, right? Once a week we talk about why the Civil Rights Act was a mistake.
Case for meritocracy. Kirk's core philosophical position is a strong belief in meritocracy. This is the idea that an individual's success should be based on their own abilities, effort, and talent, not on their race, gender, or any other group characteristic. From his perspective, his controversial comments about the qualifications of a black pilot or a black woman in customer service are not about judging an entire race. Instead, he frames them as questions about the effects of policies like diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. He argues that these programs prioritize diversity over competence, leading to a system where people are hired or promoted based on their identity rather than their excellence. His supporters would say he's not criticizing the person, but the system that put them there. He views this as a dangerous form of social engineering that undermines the very principles of fairness and individual achievement. In his worldview, judging someone by their race, even in the name of equity, is still a form of racial discrimination.
So when you see a black pilot, you wonder, boy, is that person there because they earned it or because they were placed there? That's what DEI does. It makes you ask questions you otherwise would not ask.
The airline industry is going to take an unqualified person just based off diversity.
Underqualified, not underqualified.
Underqualified, whatever, uncertified, and put them in a cockpit and risk people's lives?
Those are two different things. Under and un are two different things. Of course, United Airlines will not take someone off the side of the street and put them into a pilot. But in order to reach a 40% goal, they might cut corners. They might accelerate the process in order to reach a goal. We know this through all sorts of DEI examinations and projects over the last 10 years. When you have to choose in life. Either excellence or racial quotas will end up being the most important.
The most effective way to counter this perspective is to highlight the undeniable, merit-based achievements of the individuals in question. Michelle Obama, for example, is a graduate of Princeton and Harvard Law School, two of the most prestigious universities in the country. Her career as a licensed attorney and public servant was built on her own intellectual rigor and professional success. Her accomplishments are a clear testament to her talent and dedication, not to a system that might favor her identity. Similarly, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's qualifications are a powerful counter-argument. She also graduated with honors from Harvard and Harvard Law School. Her distinguished legal career includes serving as a federal public defender, a member of the U.S. Sentencing Commission, and a federal judge. She was confirmed by the U.S. Senate with bipartisan support on 3 separate occasions for judicial positions, a feat that speaks to her legal excellence and qualifications. Let's remember, President Biden and his administration have made a public and concerted effort to emphasize hiring women of color and promoting diversity across government.
I committed that if I'm elected president and have an opportunity to appoint someone to the courts, I'll appoint the first black woman to the courts. It's required that they have representation now. It's long overdue. I have had over a 94% rating in the state with the 8th largest black community in the United States of America, Delaware. And so they're the ones, as that old saying goes, that brought me to the dance. I have been loyal, they have been loyal to me. And so it is important that my administration, I promise you, will look like America. both as from vice president to Supreme Court to cabinet positions to every major position in the White House.
When I first became a public defender, I had no criminal defense experience. And I walked in and I told my boss, Charlie, I said, listen, you should hire me. He said, why? I said, because I'm black.
KIRK's comments can be viewed as a reaction to this, highlighting the tension between a political ideal of meritocracy and a modern policy goal of equity. The debate then becomes not just about individual qualifications, but about whether the pursuit of diversity through specific policies undermines the very merit it claims to champion, or if it is a necessary corrective to an inherently unequal system. The critique of the Civil Rights Act. Perhaps his most controversial position is his criticism of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. For most Americans, this law is a sacred piece of legislation that helped dismantle legal segregation and racial discrimination. To call it a huge mistake is seen as a rejection of racial equality itself. However, KIRK's argument isn't a call to return to Jim Crow.
Do you support the Civil Rights Act?
In spirit, but not how it's written.
Why?
It's too broad and paved its way for the persecution. For example, they're using the Civil Rights Act to put men in locker rooms like Riley was in.
How? Which article?
Article 4 or 5, I think. I actually don't know specifically. But the Civil Rights Act is being used for by the trans movement right now because they say that they are women, therefore they demand an accommodation of women's rights. Riley can riff on this. They're using the Civil Rights Act literally to have access into female locker rooms.
So what would you change about the Civil Rights Act?
I wouldn't make it as broad. I would make it much more crisp and concrete, and I wouldn't have it necessarily. I would also get rid of the disparate impact component of the Civil Rights Act. So the biggest problem with the Civil Rights Act, there's 4 components of the beast of anti-racism. There's affirmative action, DEI, disparate impact, and then of course there's a 4th that I'll remember in a second, which is basically disparate impact is that it must be racism if 2 different groups have different outcomes, which of course is outrageous. Disparate impact is the legal theory that undergirds most of the enforcement of the Civil Rights Act.
And the Civil Rights Act also blazed the trail for disparate impact as a legal theory, basically saying that if black Americans are doing worse in a group, it might not be because of marital differences or cultural differences or single motherhood issues, it must be racism. And so because of that, the Civil Rights Act was too broadly written. So the intent, it should have been a single page or a 2-page bill to say that you cannot discriminate against based on the color of somebody's skin, period, end of story. Instead, we get a multiple 100-page bill with lots of chapters and lots of lesser-known amendments that created basically a permanent anti-racist bureaucracy within our federal government to go find racism where it doesn't exist and create it new places where otherwise did not exist.
We need to remember that Charlie KIRK wasn't a politician in the conventional sense. He was, at his core, a debater. The goal of a debater isn't always to find a middle ground or to win over every single person with a smooth, agreeable message. Instead, the purpose of a debate is to present an argument, challenge opposing views, and force a discussion on complex topics. It involves an opening statement, presenting evidence, and a rebuttal, which directly addresses and counters the opposing side's arguments. This process, by its very nature, is designed to be confrontational, to test ideas, and to reveal weaknesses in logic or evidence.
Charlie, for the sake of myself, I really do appreciate the ability to debate with you, man.
I want you to think about what I asked you.
Okay, you mind if I have a hat?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Great points. I would say that I am with you for the idea of a colorblind society. I think it's a bit of a farce to say that colorblind society is something we should aspire to, but I think it's a farce to think that it doesn't exist, that race doesn't play a factor.
I totally agree.
Okay.
Yeah, you're black, but it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. It's not the most important thing. Instead, it's, are you a good person? How do you act? How do you treat other people? Are you a Christian? Like, what is your worldview? I want to get back to that. Of course, we're still going to see differences, but I want to de-emphasize them to a place where we look at each other as fellow human beings and fellow American citizens. Thank you so much,
Absolutely
man. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, can I get a half of
Absolutely.
my buddy?
Thank you, guys.
Thankfully, I was raised away from all that, 2 loving parents. And
that's the greatest thing that you are, one of the, if not the greatest. And that's my hope for every child, black, white, or Asian, to have 2 parents. That is a ticket to success. Please continue. But here's something I will encourage you to do as a Christian. Care less about people's shared racial experience and look at them instead of just as their soul as God made them. We should try to strive towards a blinder race nation, not one that talks about skin color all the time.
KIRK's debates on college campuses, though often seen as provocative, were part of a larger mission. His goal was to disrupt that technological complacency and get young people to engage with ideas they might not normally encounter. By putting himself in a direct, unscripted confrontation, he aimed to force people to think on their feet, to articulate their own beliefs, and to defend them with logic and evidence. He wanted to reignite a sense of intellectual curiosity and remind people that the most important skill is not memorizing facts, but learning how to think for yourself. Whether you agreed with him or not, his method was a direct challenge to a culture that has for too long outsourced its critical thinking to a screen. Drop your thoughts below. Let's have the real conversation. Smash that like button if you're done with the lies. Subscribe and hit the bell, because on There's No Lies Left, we don't just talk truth, we demand it.